case of Sophie Hook. So Sophie was 7 years old when in July of 1995, her and her parents traveled to Wales to visit some family. They stayed at an uncle's house in Llandudno, and it was her cousin's birthday, so they were all going to have a party at that house. Now, on July 29th, 1995, it was a very warm summer's day, and Sophie, along with all the kids in her family, played outside in the garden, and they had a paddling pool. And the 4 kids of the family had decided that that night they wanted to sleep in a tent in the garden. And so they were talking about that and making plans for that while they were in the paddling pool. So they set up the tent. They took everything inside the tent, and then around 20 past midnight, one of the children decided to go back inside. She didn't want to sleep in the tent anymore. So that left 3 children, including Sophie. Her uncle went to check on the children around 40 minutes past midnight and then went back inside. He left the back door open in case one of the kids wanted to come inside to sleep or needed to use the bathroom. So around 2:30 a.m., Sophie's cousin woke up inside the tent, and he checked the time, checked on the other 2 kids, and everything looked fine, so he went back to sleep. And then again, he woke up around 7:15 a.m., and Sophie wasn't there. Now, he just assumed that she had either already woken up and gone inside for breakfast, or that she had gone inside in the middle of the night because she didn't want to sleep in the tent anymore. So, her sleeping bag was also gone, but her cuddly toy and her other belongings were still there. So he went into the house to check on her, and when he got outside of the tent, he noticed that her sleeping bag was on the ground. So he looked all around the house, but he couldn't find her. So that's when he decided to wake up her parents and let them know that she was gone. They all panicked. They searched all around the house. They searched the garden. They searched all of the surrounding area, but they couldn't find her. And after an hour, they called the police and reported her as a missing person. Now, that morning, however, at 7:10 a.m., so before her cousin woke up and found her missing, her body had already been found. A 55-year-old man who was out walking his 2 dogs along a stretch of beach had found it. It was like, of course, kind of a very big paddling pool, or a very undeep swimming pool. I guess it was like the size of a swimming pool, but it was a paddling pool on this beach, and it was meant for these smaller kids who weren't allowed to go into the sea yet. When he approached that, he saw what he thought was a mannequin, but his dogs went absolutely crazy when they approached it, and he realized then that it was actually the naked body of a little girl. So he took off his t-shirt to cover her, and then he went to the nearest payphone to call the police. So police took the body with them to do an investigation and a post-mortem to find out what her cause of death was, and they found that Sophie had been brutally attacked. I'm not going to go into the details because they're pretty gruesome, but she had been brutally attacked, and she was also sexually assaulted. Now, her official cause of death was strangulation, and it looked like her body had been dumped on the beach by throwing it over the cliff. But, like, most likely, it was thrown over the cliff into the water. But because of the tide, the water had drawn back in the meantime, and her body washed up on the beach. Now, this is a very small town in Wales, so news spread like wildfire. one of the witnesses even said that they saw him crouching down in the bushes just outside of the uncle's house. Now, the children at this point were playing outside and talking about their plans of sleeping in the tent that night, so he could have heard the whole conversation. So one of the people that had seen him on the path that day was able to identify him as 30-year-old Howard Hughes. So police arrested him at his home where he lived with his mother on that same day. Now, Howard Hughes was a well-respected man in the town. He was a businessman and he was a civil engineer. However, his life hadn't always been smooth, so he was born with a chromosomal abnormality called XYY, which means that he had a lot more testosterone in his body than the average man. And that can cause aggression and violence. And it's also the reason that he was so tall. He had a lot of learning disabilities, dyslexia, and he had a lot of behavioral issues. And he was kicked out of school 4 times due to his behavior. So he didn't have a lot of qualifications. By the time he was 19, he had amassed over 17 convictions. And in the 10 years leading up to Sophie's murder, he had sexually assaulted 3 young girls. However, all the cases were dropped. One of the girls' parents decided to drop it because they felt that it was too traumatizing for her to go through it again. And the other 2 cases were dropped by police because they felt that the girls were too young to testify. And that saddens me because if they hadn't dropped those cases, then this would never have happened to Sophie, but he was free to just walk around. So after he was arrested for the murder of Sophie, police detained him for 4 days while they were trying to gather evidence against him, but there was no forensic evidence since he dumped her body in the water. And her clothes were also never found, so they had to let him go. But while they let him go, his electronics were being searched by police, and they found indecent pictures of children on his computer, so they arrested him again just a few hours later, and he was eventually charged for the murder of Sophie. His trial began in June of 1996. Now, the police had no forensics to tie him to Sophie, but they did have a few witnesses, one of whom was his own father, who said that on the day of Sophie's murder, Howard had confessed to him that he did it. And the next witness saw Howard on that night with Sophie. Now, I just want to say kudos to his father, because a lot of parents would protect their children. Because above everything, it is still their child, but he came forward and said that he confessed to him that he killed Sophie, and I believe that that was one of the main reasons that they convicted him. So in July of 1996, he was found guilty. He was given 3 life sentences with a whole life tariff. Now, I'm guessing that a whole life tariff in the UK is equivalent to the no possibility of parole in the US. It basically meant that he had to spend his whole life in jail. But he appealed that, and then they changed the whole life tariff to a minimum of 50 years in prison. So in 50 years, he would have the possibility of early release, but he'll be 80 years old by then, and like most people, don't think he's ever going to make it out. And that's it for this solved case. Solved cases are always really short because there's not a lot of theories going on or a lot of investigating. In this case, they arrested him the same day, which I think is really great, that they were able to find him that fast. So, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for your support, and see you soon.